What's up, YouTube? I'm Valentin the Mad, and this is a Gore review of The Punisher. Initially, I wasn't sure whether I want to discuss the game in a Gore review or a revisiting format. On one hand, many of the response mechanics are not very good. The looks of the stumps are really bad, even for that time. The bullet wounds are not particularly exciting, and there are other issues. But on the other hand, the main features that make the game stand out are related to brutality. So as you can see, eventually, the Gore reviews format it is. And I should note that I'm playing and reviewing the game with the Gore patch. It restores some of the response mechanics that were disabled in vanilla game, and disables the annoying black and white filter that gets in the way of seeing some of the kills in all their glory. You can find the link to it in the description below. So how Gore is the Punisher? Let's find out. I'll be reviewing every aspect of the game's score effects, and the score will be set based on 4 categories: body damage, environment, animations and sounds, the feel. The head can be destroyed, and limbs can also be destroyed with 1 point of amputation. As I mentioned previously, the looks are very bad. I'm not expecting Left 4 Dead 2 level of detail, but the stumps absolutely could have looked better than this. And there are other issues too. As I mentioned, the head and limbs can only be destroyed, so you'll see bits, but not the head or the limbs themselves. In this specific execution, it's really amusing to watch the head explode. Activation is also somewhat off. On one hand, heads and limbs will sometimes explode when they realistically shouldn't, like on this kill, or on a single hit from an AK. But on the other hand, dismemberment will rarely be activated on close range shotgun kills. I wouldn't mind the latter if the emphasis was on realistic activation, but that is very clearly not the case. And I want to mention this instance. One of the executions is shoving a grenade in an enemy's mouth. The poor bastard runs around for 2 seconds before it explodes, killing him and whoever stands nearby. The execution itself is awesome, but the body damage response seems to be random activation of dismemberment. So yes, you can see the proper result of a lost head, but you're more likely to see a limb or 2 removed, which makes no sense. Now for the non-dismembering damage. For guns, you'll see wounds at the point of impact. The best thing about it is the consistent activation, both in combat and in executions. The issue would be with the looks. The hole itself looks more like a flower than a gory wound. It may give you some ideas if clothing design is your thing, but it doesn't work very well as a response for gunfire. And, as you can see, there are wounds of different sizes. However, that is not because I shot the character with different caliber weapons. The size of the wound seems to be randomized on each hit. It's a shame. With different looks, some variety of decals, different wounds for different calibers, and no size randomization, the feedback could have been amazing. The response for the face smashing interrogations will be blood splatter that will get stronger on further hits. It's not detailed face mutilation, but for the purpose of interrogations where you have no control over the spot where the character is hit, it will generally get the job done. However, blood splatter won't work quite as well for the executions and some special interrogation deaths, where it will be the main response. While it will usually appear in the right location, and it is better than nothing at all, it doesn't feel quite as good as seeing properly gory wounds at the point of each impact. There is a bigger issue with executions though. Many of them are done with the knife, and for all of those, with the exception of the human sacrifice skill, there will be no body damage. So you'll be slicing throats, piercing skulls, and stabbing faces, but none of those will cause any response on the body whatsoever. I want to note 2 non-dismembering head variations. You'll see this beautiful thing as a response for frying a character's face in hot oil, and for letting piranhas munch on it, but sadly, there is no way to combine both and fry the meat before feeding it to the piranhas. There is also this one, which I'm not entirely sure what it is. As for the burning, the body damage will be an overlay on the character. As you would expect, it's pretty low res, but the cool thing about it is the functionality. The victim will be running around for a pretty long while, and he'll set other characters on fire, often leading to chain reactions. And of course, you have the boss fights. You encounter characters who for some reason can take a ridiculous amount of damage. The only way of dealing with them is repeatedly attacking their unresponsive ass or head until the oversized health bar will drain and they'll die. Such fights are neither interesting nor exciting, and plastering a large health bar on a character is one of the cheapest ways of making a fight challenging. Now I should note that in the case of the last boss, you'll see parts of his suit fall off as you damage him with explosives. However, the fight itself is very repetitive, and that mechanic is not enough to make it exciting. One fight, however, is an exception to all I mentioned. The first encounter with the Russian. You have to grab him when he's stunned and smash his head with various objects in Frank's apartment. The fight itself is by no means challenging, but it is an entertaining and a memorable sequence, which is much more enjoyable than the other boss fights, including the second one with that same Russian. There are 3 types of stains. The ones that will appear if there is a surface right behind the exit wound. The stains and puddles for some of the executions. And the ones that will be used for most of the spinning in the game. So you'll see those activated on every single shot, and the vast majority of the other hits. They'll form a blood trail after the character dies, and you'll see some more of them activated on dismembering hits. As you can see, the looks aren't great, but the mechanics will work consistently, and they will make the hits and the kills feel more satisfying. However, there are issues. The blood trail will often end too quickly, and there are no blood pools. You'll see blood spilled while the character is falling, but there will be nothing after he lands. What's even more odd is that the blood pool mechanic already exists in the game. You'll see it activated for some of the special executions and the interrogations, but you won't see it in the combat itself. Now how's the mess in the long term? There's a limit of 11 for dead bodies. The threshold for maximum bloodstains is bigger, but you'll still see them disappear. And there are time limits for the execution stains that will vary between 10 to about 30 seconds. As far as I'm aware, there is no way to configure the thresholds, so you'll see the full aftermath for the smaller fights, but not for the bigger ones towards the mid-end of the game. You have response animations on impact, death animations. Characters will drop their weapon when shot in the hand. Characters will get scared when they see you execute someone. In some cases they'll surrender. You can throw characters. And of course, most importantly, you have the glorious interrogations and executions. The response and death animations will deliver basic feedback, but not much beyond that. And there are no changes of behavior in between. No limping, no disabled state. Yes, characters can drop their weapon, but they'll just pick it back up right after that. And you will see some characters running around after they took their arm off. However, that lasts only for 3 seconds. There's a pretty neat response of characters getting scared or disgusted when they see you execute their fellow mobsters, but for the most part, after the reaction, they'll go right back to shooting you. There are exceptions though. Some characters will surrender after they see you kill their friend in a horrible way. Fairly common in the early levels, less common in the later ones. And the character you're supposed to interrogate will almost always surrender after you kill everyone else. As for the executions, there's a very large variety. Executions for rifles, pistols, a shotgun, or a flamethrower. Whether you're coming from the front or the back. Executions for objects you can pick up. Executions based on location, if you're near a ledge or on a staircase. Unarmed melee kills. Rage mode executions. And the special executions, such as feeding an anaconda. Or kicking someone into an active bear trap that for some reason is hanging on the wall. The executions are creative, well animated, and they're very entertaining. And now for the biggest brutality related mechanic, the interrogations. One of the things you'll be doing in the game is extracting information out of characters who initially aren't willing to cooperate. You have to apply a very specific amount of pressure and keep it for 3 seconds. There are 3 main ways to apply said pressure. The first one is threatening. Show the character a potential horrible death, push him back and forth towards it until it breaks, but if you push too far, you might accidentally kill him. The second one I call trick threatening, very similar to the first one, but you also have to take into account a third party, which can be a rhino, a shark, or machinery. And, the most brutal of all, torture. Extract the information by force. There's a certain detail about it I really appreciate. At first, just threatening the character will have little effect, but as you've beaten him nearly to death, he'll get easily scared just by the threat of having his face smashed again. Another cool thing about interrogations would be the character sound responses. At first they'll usually tell you to get lost,
I spit on you, American pig!
But as you start applying pressure, they'll very audibly get nervous before breaking. And I should note that there is a very large variety of interrogations as well, for you can perform almost anywhere, and a lot of special and very creative ones scattered across the levels. You can find a separate video with my personal favorite special interrogation deaths and executions in the end screen and in the description below. The response sounds are not bad. You hear the steps, the smashes, and in some cases, blood pouring down. What is lacking is the response sound for when the character hits the ground after a long fall, which should be very mild.
Sucks to be them.
As for the character responses, they'll react when hit, on death, and will comment during the fight. The hit responses are not particularly long, but they will generally get the job done.
You better join it!
I especially like the ones for slashing throats and stabbing faces, which really makes me wish those were taken further and didn't end in 2 or 3 seconds.
Not you!
As for the comments, they'll generally be somewhat cartoonish.
Too young to die! I never miss!
I'm not a huge fan of that, but there were some glorious moments, such as the response for killing a teammate, that can vary from an apology to I was going to kill him anyway, toning it up you pussy as a response for seeing a teammate die, some of Rank's puns and comments.
I want to go home! In a box. This night's turning out better.
And a few other amusing dialogues and moments.
You're an asshole, Dixon, and I got a lead enema for you.
Hey. Thanks, asshole. How about a decent weapon? Yeah, okay.
So how does it feel? By the damage wise, the responses are basic at best, non-existent at worst. The blood spilling for the game's age is not bad. it will deliver a basic initial response, and I do appreciate the blood trail mechanic, but blood pools and full aftermath for the bigger fights are very much missing. And animation wise, aside from the interrogations and the executions, the feedback will be very basic. So the Punisher won't deliver a particularly responsive experience. However, there is some brutal fun to be had with the game. The large amount of executions is great, and, as far as I'm aware, the Punisher is the only game where interrogations and torture are a key part of the gameplay. So the score for body damage is 7 out of 30. The score for environment is 13 out of 30. The score for animations and sounds is 18 out of 30. I give the feel a score of 4 out of 10. So this gives the core system of the Punisher a score of 42 out of 100. A few points about the game Gore aside. The Punisher shows its age in terms of graphics, and there will be some rough moments, but overall, the game doesn't feel clunky. The Gore may not be as good as I remembered it to be, but the experience is still very enjoyable. In the prison level, one thing that caught my attention is the death row layout. The cells are located right next to the execution method, and if you think about it seriously for a moment, this placement is brutal as fuck. As I mentioned, aside from fatal interrogations and executions, you can dispose your meat shield by simply throwing him. It's pretty clunky in this game, but the idea itself is awesome, and if a mechanic like this was done in one of the newer engines, with active ragdolls, proper gore, and interior destruction, it could be absolutely amazing. And one of the interrogations lets you recreate a scene from The Ring, so I would recommend destroying every TV you encounter afterwards. That's it for today. Let me know how you feel in the comment section, and if you enjoyed the video, subscribe and share it around. To support the channel and help keep the gore coming, you get the Patreon and the merch store, linked in the description below. Until next time.